main idea of this presentation that I've tried to represent here using my primitive PowerPoint skills is that every organization has a set of best practices guide, but it's impossible to expect an author to learn it by heart before starting to actually write. So a recommended approach would be to dynamically offer guidance and hints based on the context on which the author, the writer, is working at a given time. So this is the goal of the presentation, and during its journey I will find some situations to present some new features that will be available in oXygen 17, which is not yet released but will come in a couple of months. Before anything else, I have to talk a little about the alternate CSS support in oXygen. So the oXygen author mode uses CSS for the layout, for the formatting, and this alternate CSS support means that you can switch which CSS applies at a given moment. So if we take the layers of a map as a reference point, if you want to present the roads in your document, you would create a roads CSS, and when the user activates that CSS, it will appear. Same, let's say, for elevation, you would create elevation CSS, and so on. Things get complicated if you want to present the roads and the elevation too. At that moment, in oXygen 16 at least, you'd have to create a new CSS, the roads plus elevation CSS. And things would get really complicated and if you had many such layers that you want to activate. And that's why one of our colleagues had this revelation that things are not as easy and as helpful as they could be with these alternate CSSs. And so we changed them a bit. So you can change the CSS from this styles menu on the toolbar. And what you can do now, you can activate base CSS, and on top of that CSS you can activate any numbers of layers. So for example, if I want to see colored revision changes, I activate that layer. If I want to hide this draft at the bottom of the document, I'll just say to hide draft comments. So both of these layers are active right now. Let's take a look at how this is defined in the frame preferences, and I will edit the document type on the author tab, the CSS tab. So things here look just as they did before. You have a number of CSSs, you have your base CSSs which have no as alternate, and the layers or the alternate CSS all have this it's just a checkbox here. In case you've created oXygen model, you can still use them if you don't want to refactor them right now. All you have to do is just disable these options right here, and
to be disabled,
right, because it's saved, because it's not in the framework file. That's right. Okay.
So you could just say they're basically having 9 alternate style sheets is 2 of the power 9, so 512 different possibilities that are covered by this. Right?
So it offers a lot more flexibility. Another interesting thing here is the fact that this custom topic of mine is an extension of the built-in DITA framework in oXygen. So what does this mean? So I guess you're all familiar with the framework concept by now. It was mentioned a few times already. And the thing is that if you wanted to customize an existing built-in document type or built-in framework in oXygen, like let's say the DITA framework, you would start from what comes built-in with oXygen, and you would just start to modify the CSS, add some new actions, and you transform it into your own custom framework. That's just fine, but a problem, a possible difficulty arises in the future when, let's say, in a new version, so let's assume that you have a customization of a 16 built-in DITA framework, and now in oXygen version 17, we've added some new auto actions or maybe some interesting rules in the CSS file and so on, and you would like to bring them into your custom document type. To do that, you'll have to manually diff the resources of the frameworks, the configuration, the .framework file, and bring in all the new things that you want, that you like. With this extension support that we've added in oXygen 16.1, I think, you're just, instead of altering an existing document type, you just extend it. So you click on this extend button and you extend it, and even though it will not look any different than when you're altering an existing document type, what's different is that oXygen will just save what you've changed, so it kind of saves like a patch and then applies it on the original framework. So when you will deploy your framework with a new version of the built-in document type, it will just work and you'll have access to those new features. Right. So, returning to the main idea of the presentation about guiding the author, this is how a DITA task looks by default in oXygen. So there's not much information here about what you should do. So if you are new to DITA or new to oXygen or new to this organization for which you are writing, then you might need some help about how to tackle each element, what information to provide in each one. So I will activate such an alternate CSS, and let's see what changes. So what I have done is I've added a number of hints next to each element. So if you want to enter a short description, you will get some hints about what this short description should contain, and so on for the prerequisites, the context. So now if I'm not sure what I should do in a certain context, I can get some guidance right in that context. How I've added those hints was pretty simple. All you need is just a CSS rule, and on the content property, so you're just adding static content. I've put the hints there, so very easy to add them. There are some let's say disadvantages or things that you should be aware of. The first one would be that this kind of hints expression can be hard to maintain and read, because if you want styling, you are forced to use oXyLabel and special characters. So this is just a static content, right? But if I wanted to make it look like this, so here I want a new line, so I will add the hexadecimal code for new line. Here I want a bullet. It's the hexadecimal code for the bullet. This part of text I want it to be bold, so I'll use the oXyLabel, which is an oXygen extension function that we've added specifically to allow this kind of low-level styling in static content. So because of all these, maintaining such a documentation, such a hint, can be troublesome in the future. Another aspect to consider is if you have other static content on that particular element. Here, for example, for this steps element, I have a static label on the before which says steps. So I've added my hints on the after, like this. If I were to put them both on the before, for example, then this border here that I want around my hints area will also come around the steps label. So that's just a limitation of using static content. And you might or you might not meet this particular situation. An alternative that solves these two aspects is to use form controls. In case you don't know what author form controls are, an author form controls can be a checkbox, a text field, a combo box, date picker. So we have great numbers of built-in form controls that you can add in your document, and they can edit either the text document, the text content of an element, or an attribute value, and you can even create complex custom form controls that alter the document in any way they see fit by using our Java API. And you've already seen in Claudius' presentation that tree form control that presented the senses. That's a custom form control. So we've created a new type of built-in form control, the HTML content form control, which can render a piece of HTML content. So, like I mentioned before, a form control is you bind it in the CSS on the content property by using an oXygen extension function. In this case, the oxy.html content. It has a number of parameters. The first one, the href, gives the HTML document from which the documentation is extracted. The second one, the ID, is an ID to identify the actual documentation block. So in this case, this ID will point to an HTML block like this. So for the same situation as before, to get this type of a hint, I just write this HTML content. I will use a list item, a bold element to style. So, and another aspect to mention is that you can use CSSs to control how this documentation block is being rendered. So I should also show it to you in the the document. So for example, this is an HTML document that contains documentation blocks for all my elements. And at the beginning I'm importing CSS, in which I add rules to style just those documentation blocks. So there will be no collision between the CSS written for rendering the author mode and the CSS to render these hints areas. Okay, so I should also activate it. It looks pretty much the same, but now I'm using this form control. And in this hint, I can also add all kinds of labels to. This was a link to the style guide, to DITA style guide, so you can read some more about that element. Right, so it's a little better, but we can still make some improvements. The first one would be that these hints should be presented on request. So it's great that you can see all this information about what you're supposed to do in each context, but at some point you will become more accustomed with the vocabulary, with the best practices, rules, and you will need all these hints to clutter your interface. So let's make them visible on request. To do that, I will change the CSS. And my toolbar should be here, but it obviously isn't. And that you've encountered these kind of situations a lot if you've customized the auto mode in oXygen. There is a more powerful rule that overrides what you're trying to do, and things just don't look as you want them to look. And at this point, you would have to open your CSSs and search through them for rules that might match on this particular element. If you have just one CSS file, that might be okay, but if you have dozens, then it can get pretty ugly. But what you can do right now, or more correctly, what you will be able to do in oXygen version 17, is to use the CSS Inspector. So this CSS Inspector will present all the rules that match on a particular element, and if a certain property is being overridden, that you will see it strike through, and you can also identify which rule overrides this particular property. So it has a number of tabs here on the bottom part. So the first one presents the rules for the element. The second one presents the same thing but for the before pseudo element. For the after, in this case I don't have an after, but if I add, it would be here. And you also have the computed styles. So this is what oXygen will use to render this particular element. And we have one more tab. This path tab presents all the ancestors of the current element that you are inspecting, and it also presents the attributes for each element. And this can be helpful to decide why a certain rule matched on a particular element. And if you have many selectors that match on attributes, like for example, like we have in our DITA framework, everything is matched on the class attribute, then it would be a lot easier to see that yes, this is an ordered list extension, and this is why it's being matched on that rule that I had for ordered lists, and so on. So let's take our task element, go to the before, right, and I see here that I have a rule that gives me this content, and it's overridden, it overrides and has override the actual toolbar that I wanted here. So to solve this problem, I will click and open that CSS. I'll comment. And now I have my toolbar, and we can resume our presentation. So this was the CSS Inspector, which is a nice feature to have, and I've personally used it. I've used it a lot since we've added it, and I realized how difficult life was without it. So. Okay, so now I have this toolbar, and if I want to see the hints, the instruction, I can click on this inline action form control, and I will get my my hints. If I don't need them anymore, I can click again, and they will be hidden. Another thing that I can do here is I can present some inline actions, which can also help the author a lot, because actions that would normally appear on the toolbar are offered right in the context where they are meant to be used by the author. So the document is becoming the entire interface the author needs. So we've talked about the CSS Inspector. Right. A drawback of this toolbar is that if I am working somewhere in the document and I decide to switch the hints on or off, I'm forced to scroll to the beginning and click on the actions, then go back to where I were, and so on and so on. So let's address this problem by making the toolbar floatable. To do that, I'll go to the CSS and activate some rules. Right. Just a second. this resolution is giving me troubles. Right, so pretty much the same toolbar, but now I have this action here, and if I click it, the toolbar becomes floatable, and it will always be presented on screen. So now if I want to show the actions, I click show the actions or hide them or so on. And if I don't need it anymore, I can just click on that pin action, it will go to the beginning. How was that possible? Well, I did it by using the CSS position property, which we will support in oXygen version 17. And the supported values are absolute and fixed for blocks, and relative for blocks and inline both. And we can also take a look in the CSS and see the rules. Oh, here I actually wanted 12 centimeters. Okay, so by default, this before is position relative, so that's how I pushed it on the right, by its relative, and it has this left inset of 12 centimeters, also width. But when this fixed pseudo class, custom pseudo class is being set, my element becomes fixed again with a left inset. So this is what that action, that pin action does. It just switches a custom pseudo class, and we can't see it here. So this is an inline action for control. And
I don't know if
yes,
you know about custom pseudo classes. Maybe you can talk.
Yeah, so in CSS you have the built-in pseudo classes, which are kind of meta information like the hover or the active on a link element, on an A element, but you can also define your own custom pseudo classes. In my case, I'm using this fixed, I just call it fixed. And oXygen provides support for setting your own custom pseudo classes, and through these author actions, and you can write rules, different rules, based on which pseudo class is active at a given time. Another thing that I want to emphasize on this level is the fact that when I've added this inline action form control, I've defined the author actions inline, right in the CSS. So previously in oXygen 16, and I've also mentioned that in Claudia's presentation, if you want to add an inline action form control, you would have to go in the document type edit dialog and define your action there, and then go to the CSS and bind that action to your button form control. So two places. You needed to go to two places. What you can do right now is you can use this action parameter, and by using the oXygen CSS extension, you can define the author action right here in the CSS. So I have the operation that the author action invokes, the name, description, and these are the arguments for this operation. So pretty much the information that you would configure in preferences, you are giving it right here in the CSS. And this is great because when you're developing a new action, you won't have to constantly go to preferences, change a bit the action, go back to the XML, see if it's what you want. You can just put the CSS next to the XML and just change something in the action, save, go in the XML, test it, and so on. So it would be a lot faster. But one aspect that needs mentioning is that in the CSS you can just define one operation. So in the preferences dialog, an author action can consist in multiple operations, and the first one that matches a given context will be executed. In the CSS you can just give one operation. I guess we thought that the CSS selector already restricts the context good enough so that all you need is one operation. Oops. Right. Sorry about it. I got lost in my slides. One last thing that I want to present is sort of a dynamic help. So things are a little better now. The hints are presented on request. But a disadvantage is that you're seeing all the hints at once. So if I'm working here in the steps context, I would prefer if you would just present me the guidance for the hints element instead of adding them in the entire document. So to achieve this goal, I had to use the Java API. It was kind of fun. So the bundle and the styles filter. And I have on the right side of the, and if I'm working a context, it will present me for the context. If I'm in the steps element, it will present the hints for the steps, and so on. How I did that? I had to use the styles filter API to dynamically add this new type of form control, an HTML content form control, and also fixed positioning to make that HTML content fixed. And I also needed a listener for when the character changes in the document to get the new hints to present to the user to refresh the documentation area. And because we have time, as a bonus, you can also take a look at the Java code. So this is the styles filter. So the idea is that I want what I would normally write in the CSS like this, I want to add from the Java styles filter extension. So I'm creating a map of properties. I'm putting there the href to the hints document, the ID of the documentation to be presented. The type is a predefined value. I want the HTML content form control. After that, I'm creating So I want this to be 40% wide, so I'm creating this kind of an object. All these goes into an editor content object, and on the mixed content properties of the styles. And I'm also setting here the position property to fixed with the left inset. So something like that you would do to add any type of flow control from the Java API. And I also needed a caret listener. That's why I also had to change the bundle. So I can add this caret listener. And what I do here is I just check if the context is changed. Then I will just refresh the root element, because the hints are added on the root, on the before pseudo element of the root element. So thank you, and if you have any questions.
No question?
It's impressive, like cool.
If you don't have any questions, then I can present you a little more, or should we let the...
You don't
or should we let the autocorrect part for the last...
We still have. We still have the last session.
The last session will be with feedback from you guys, so...
Well, let me... Yes, but...
if you don't want, we can keep this for the last part.
Just
yes.
some words about what Alex presented. So this part with the content, with the static content, really helps a lot to be able to bring within the user interface information to the user, to communicate with them. And then you can add a schema from paragraph when the user makes a mistake. You also show an error message, quick fixes when you allow them to fix that, right? And then you have these hints that they can show or hide. And actions, contextual, exactly within the document, so they know what they can do at that point in the document. So that's why I said at the beginning that I think that with this kind of user interfaces, the learning, the training that you need for a user is reduced a lot. Because you have this possibility to communicate with the users. And let them know what's possible when they make a mistake, show that mistake to them, not only show them tell them how to fix that, but also provide them alternative actions that they can choose to fix that. Yes. So let's see that I generate questions.
Yes. At the beginning of the talk, I was almost jealous, seeing that you wanted to guide the writer, and we're wondering if you don't want to guide the developers too. And then thinking more about it, when you display a yellow bulb in text mode, it's a way to guide the developer. And I was kind of expecting that you would end up with a solution to implement this kind of yellow bulb in the outcome of display your tips. Is it something which...
Well, yes, you can do that. So you use a yellow bulb to click and present a hint.
Yes.
Just an author action that presents that hint. So
it could be similar to the HTML control, or
exactly.
Just something that when you click on it, you do show that piece of text.
Another, it would be a little bit more homogeneous with the text mode.
That's an interesting idea. I'm sorry I didn't thought of it, to put yellow bulbs next to...
Another difficulty that we realized, and Alex kind of touched that with the steps label, right, is that if you already have content before or after, represented things, and then you have labels, and you may have examples, you may have, I don't know, advanced wording notices, and so on. So if you want to bring with static content different type of content in multiple layers, let's say that not all available at the same time, then you will keep again the problems do I put what before, what do I put after, what's the CSS already, what does the CSS already provide before or after some element, and do I override that? So you need to have knowledge about the base CSS. So what we are working right now is to support before 1, before 2, and so on, which is specified in CSS quality, and outer 1, outer 2, that will allow you to bring this additional static content without interfering with other static content. So you can bring an entire layer of hints on before 2 and actions from before 3 or after 4, or so you decide on a level and you put actions on that, and that will not interfere with the rest of the styles. So this will simplify a lot maintaining and defining this, because you just focus on that part without thinking, why interact with some other styles or some other content.
Good night, and apply imports or CSS.
Apply imports
Or CSS to apply all the redefined styles again in the same context. The other before, so to speak, or the other after.
Yeah, they will remain basically on where they are defined.
Yeah.
But then if you put before 1, then before so before 2 will be before that, and so on. So you can decide, and before 100 will be my hints. That will be where you put the hints.
So something like that, like this. So here you say that I want on the before 1. Somewhere else you'd say I want on the before on the 4th level, and so on.
So we are trying to push also the CSS to the limit, and oXygen and really the new CSS specification, new functionality that's available, and see what makes sense for the editing tool. So we can really allow people to create these user interfaces and maintain them easily, because otherwise it gets a lot more complex. Yes.
Will it be available for all frameworks that are, you showed us for a data framework, but for example, we are using the NLM
Yes.
Framework. Will it be available for that framework?
The functionality is there. The DITA framework is just takes advantage of the existing functionality. The DITA framework, all the code or even the Java tools for everything that's in the DITA framework, in the global framework, is available as part of the oXygen SDK. So the source code is available. These projects that Alex presented will be made available on GitHub. Different examples of what different types of user interfaces that can be created, will be made available as open project on GitHub. So you will have examples to start from. Yes?
Along that line, I thought they were using this where they're using a teacher environment, so their documentation framework, but they know when they have an implementation of the framework, they're going to have it would be possible to associate input data with these things, because they know that they're going to need hints for certain locations or what to do, what to set up. They like to kind of associate data, or they know that input will give us values. Could you associate the input with the tooltip or your content?
Well, so I don't know if I got exactly what you want, but Alex also presented some examples to integrate with external data sources.
Exactly.
Right? Either you can do that either for hints, but Alex, what we presented as an example was to actually provide values for an attribute, for instance, by looking up on a database. Or, the example was actually looking within the XYZ database, because they have an REST API, so you can open the URL and get an XML document. We have an API that allows you basically to have a configuration file
Well, actually, from 17 we've put it by default in oXygen. Yeah, so all you will have to do is write an XML configuration file, and with an XSLT script. In this XSLT script, you will connect to a REST service and just bring values, and those values will be values for attributes. oXygen will present them as the possible values for an attribute.
Yes, so that XSLT script actually converts the external service, let's say, which can give you information in different formats, in a format that oXygen will understand for content completion. And as a file description of file description. It's an XML format that contains that information.
Okay. Coffee break?
Yeah. Thank you.